we're live. Pomp, thank you so much for coming in. It's funny. I've been following you for a couple years now, and you're one of those people, actually alongside Andrew Schultz, that were at the top of my list when I built out this place that I wanted to get in studio. So we're 1 for 2 there, and I appreciate
Andrew, let's go.
Dude, Andrew, you're coming next, man. And what's funny about Andrew? I hit him up when I was 19 or 20, and I said, come on my pod, and he had responded. He said, I promise we'll do it one day. So
all right,
we'll get there.
He's a man of his word. He'll do it if he
is a man of his word, and he's a New Yorker. We both went to UC Santa Barbara for a little bit of time, so there's a lot of similarities there. But I appreciate you coming in. Thank you for taking the time, man.
Of course.
So I told you a few seconds ago, is there a little tidbit, a little story, a little something the world doesn't know about you from what's already out there?
Yeah. When I was a kid, if you had asked me like what I wanted to be when I grew up, there was a period of time, maybe a couple of years, where I would have told you a lawyer, which sounds insane compared to what I do now, and it's probably the least likely thing that I actually would have ended up doing. But I really enjoyed, I think, arguing and debating. And then also this idea of like facts and like actually getting to the truth regardless of people's opinion. And so if you look at a lot of things in my life, I probably actually did end up incorporating a lot of that. So, when I'm on television debating people and things like that, like growing up in a large family of all boys, you just talk shit all the time. And so like that probably helped. But also like being able to formulate an argument and be able to really convince people of, A or B is important. And then one of the things that's been pretty interesting over the years is as I've met a lot of people or read books, listened to folks on podcasts, there's a very large portion of successful entrepreneurs that actually wanted to be lawyers as well. Some even went as far as going to law school and then not going and practicing law. And I do think that there's this very interesting kind of dynamic that it teaches you how to think, teaches you how to communicate. I never went to law school, but I do think that having a desire to do it, I probably lent myself more to figuring out, if you are going to go down this path, what exactly would it entail? And so, most people probably don't know that, but there's a lot of similarities, I think, to what I ended up doing.
Well, I think one of the things that I particularly admire about your work in general is the way that you're able to synthesize and explain and use the right words and vocabulary to kind of, for lack of a better word, dumb down more complex concepts into more understandable terms. Have you always had that ability, or is this something that as you've been on TV and as you've done podcasts has improved over time?
I don't think it has that much to do with communication. I think the communication style is a byproduct of actually understanding what you're talking about. If you were to go down the street and ask people about many of the topics they talk about on a daily basis, most of them just don't know what they're talking about. Right. And so therefore they hide behind big words, very complex kind of language or even philosophies. Right. You'll see people on Twitter who tweet these things, and to a layman's eye, you're like, that sounds really smart. And if you just ask yourself, like, what the fuck is this person saying? They don't understand what they're talking about. And so there's the old, adage of like, if I had more time, I would have made it shorter. Very similar, I think, is if you actually understand what you're talking about, you can boil it down to the essence of what that actual topic is about or what the argument is. And then you use simple language because it expresses the mastery, right? If you ever talk to someone and they describe something very simply, you're like, okay, I get it. And obviously you know what you're talking about because you explained it to me. And so I think it's less about me or a communication style. It's literally just, we have this like pandemic across the world of people talking about shit that they don't have any clue about. And you see it when they try to describe it to someone else. It's very hard for them to teach other people about it.
What's your process when it comes to mastering a concept or an idea so that you can then synthesize it in a very layman's or simplistic term?
A lot of tabs open on the computer. I think I just have this like innate intellectual curiosity to just keep looking for more information. And if there's one downside to that, I can spend hours looking at something and, you find the first topic and then all of a sudden there's footnotes or there's hyperlinks or whatever. And next thing you know, you've read, 20 different sources about things that are even related to it. The second thing is because of the podcast and in my experience there, I'll go and I'll try to find people. And I'm pretty effective at getting them on the phone or getting them to do a podcast or even just meeting up. And I pretty much just berate them with questions until they tell me to stop. And I'm unapologetic about it. If I'm at dinner with a group of people, I'll literally just say, hey, I don't understand this. Could you explain it to me? And I'll just start firing questions. And what you find is like people actually want to talk about it. They want to debate about it. They would love for you to say, well, why do you guys do it this way? Why don't you do it this way? And so there's a kind of win-win scenario there. And then the last thing I think is just the broader you go, the more you see similarities. And so I've been very cognizant of not going super deep on any one thing and at the expense of understanding other things. And so sure, I have deep knowledge or expertise on certain things, but it's always that plus other things. And when you have that more well-rounded view of the world, I think that it helps.
I think what's interesting, I was listening to you on another podcast talk about, in high school, perhaps, maybe you're not reading the books or you're not doing the work. And now you are. And now if you were to go back to high school, I think the quote was more or less that you'd be in the front of the class asking all the questions. At what point did that switch for you in your life where you had this desire, this just tremendous desire of curiosity and learning?
I was always curious and I was always learning. It just, I didn't want to learn the shit they were telling me to learn. Right. It's funny. Like I would go, and I remember in high school, just long drawn out arguments with my parents of, you're getting C's. Why won't you get better grades? You're not a moron. Like the grades don't reflect, what we think your intelligence is. And it just boiled down to, although I couldn't articulate it at the time, like I just don't care. Right. And as a teenage kid, like you can't really say that to your parents and mean it. Like you may say it as an offhand comment. But I was learning about a bunch of other stuff, and I would sit for hours and debate and argue and do all these things on these other topics. And then every once in a while, there would be a class that would overlap with my interest and I would get an A. And my parents would be like, we know you can do this. Like, what are you doing? And so I think one of the crescendo moments of this tension in my academic career was I got a C in a film class. And I literally remember coming home and being like, damn, that's bad. Yeah. Right. And my dad just being like, are you fucking kidding me? Right. Like you literally watch movies in the class and have to talk about them. You got a C. And I just was like, yeah, but it's, stupid movies. Like I just don't care. Right. And so you contrast that with there was a class about American government and less like politics and more just like, hey, how does the country built and how do we govern ourselves and things like that. I got an A in it, and a couple years later, one of my brothers who's younger than me, his friends basically said to him, and he relayed it to me, that the teacher had enjoyed it so much that on one of the questions of the test, I was one of the multiple choice options, right? So like, how do you balance that? It's literally just like, are you interested or are you not? And so now I've got a young child, and I think a lot about like, who cares what we want her to learn, right? How do we just figure out what is she interested in and like just go full speed at that? And my guess is that she'll probably end up being more intelligent, better read, kind of more prepared for the world doing that than sitting in a room being told you have to learn this thing that you don't care about.
First of all, congratulations on being a newborn dad.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I wanted to bring that up a little bit later, but while we're on the topic, how will you, based off of your experience, approach the raising and education of your child? Because I think you also have very real and concrete opinions on whether it's the education system, what to learn, how to learn, and how do you guys intend as a family to implement that when it comes to the education of your newborn?
I think the best way to think about it is there's a book Clayton Christensen wrote called How You Measure Your Life. And in it, one of the things he talks about is outsourcing the raising of your child to somebody else. And he's not talking about just nannies or babysitters or things like that. He's talking about many parents, either because they have to, right? If you're in an economic situation where you have to work 2 jobs or very long hours, or both parents are working and not getting home till late at night. There's millions of Americans that are in this situation. You have to outsource the raising of your child in a certain number of hours to somebody else. And sometimes, unfortunately, you don't have a choice, right? And so the environment they grow up in is actually really, really important. There's studies now that show the zip code you grow up in can determine how wealthy you're going to be. It's like one of the single highest correlation points. And so by simply moving from a low income zip code to a high income zip code and the parent doing nothing else, the kid has a better shot. And it's just environment. And so then there's some parents who they have the economic means to help make sure that the kid goes to a school of their choosing, or maybe that it has certain sports or after school activities, friends that they hang out with, coaches and adults that they interact with. And the parents don't care. And so, I was recently talking about this idea that all this rise of artificial intelligence is going to bring about these personalized tutors. If you go back in history, one-on-one tutoring is the single greatest way to learn.
Right.
And sometimes it was a parent teaching a child. Sometimes it was a professional teacher teaching a child. I recently learned that Oxford, I didn't understand this, but I guess Oxford, they basically have classes of 1 or 2 students per teacher. And so they have big lecture halls and things that you'll go to. But one of the most elite schools in the entire world understands that student to teacher ratio is really important. And so when you go and you look at artificial intelligence, there's a number of people who have done it. I'm an investor in a company called Synthesis that's built one of these kind of personalized tutors. So a student can get on and talk with and interact with basically a personalized tutor done at scale. And so the ramifications of displacing teachers, the ramifications of increasing education, those are all pretty well covered and documented and people are excited about. But one of the downsides to this that people aren't talking about is what happens when we don't have an 8-hour-a-day babysitting service for children. Parents can't rely now on 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, the bus comes and picks them up, and I got to be back to pick them up at 3:30, 4 o'clock. What are we going to, as a society, do with millions of kids that now all of a sudden don't have babysitters? And so these are some of the ramifications of technology, but it does go back to it's a net positive because teaching the kids, getting them more educated, having them be accelerated more from an academic standpoint is worth it, even if there's trade-offs like, hey, we got to solve this other problem around childcare and kind of the quote unquote, school system as a babysitter. And so I think that there's a lot of change happening, but ultimately it drives back to history got it right. One-on-one tutoring is probably the single best thing that you can do in terms of learning.
What were the conversations like with your wife and you probably still have them every day, on the decisions that you're going to make when it comes to the education of your child? And what do they look like?
We haven't made concrete decisions yet. Yeah, our child's 2 years old, right? So we've got a little bit of time. But I'm probably a little bit more comfortable doing things however I think are best, and like who cares what anyone thinks, and maybe a little bit of that like contrarian nature. I've just done it enough times where I literally just don't care, don't even think twice that somebody may judge it. Right. I think she's more a little bit socially aware that like, hey, the way that you school, care for, and treat your child, there's like a social norm.
Right.
And if you don't fit into that, like people will kind of be like, what are you doing? And so the conversation really is just like, how much do you care about like the social norms versus the education? To her credit, it's the education, right? Like we're very much aligned on like, how do you educate someone? And so I've got a lot of friends with kids and I'm fortunate enough to, have them tell me what they did, what were the pros, what were the cons. And again, it just goes back to the environment. And, if you look at what Clayton had written, he basically was saying, if you outsource the raising of your child to other people, there's things like 1 + 1 = 2. A, B, C, D, they have to learn that stuff at some point. They probably will. But actually what you're outsourcing is morals, is ethics, is decision-making, right? And if you are someone who thinks that stuff is important, then it's probably helpful for you to be actively involved. And so that's hard, especially when you have ambitious, hardworking, kind of parents that really want to accomplish the things that they've set for themselves. But if you talk to most parents, like, their kid being successful is a pretty important, kind of goal, if you will, in their life. And so it's kind of like not what you say, it's what you do. And you can look at the actions of people, and the more outsourcing that happens, I think that is probably, be better off if the parents were more involved.
You've talked about being happy, and where you're at right now, you feel happy, which I think is amazing. And I think honestly is when I heard you, the ways that you talked about it too, it almost goes under the radar that people kind of skip out on, like asking themselves if they're happy or not. When do you feel like you hit a point where you could sit down and say, Pomp, I'm happy?
I think I always was like inherently happy, right? It's kind of like optimist versus pessimist. If you're an optimistic person, you probably tend to be happier just naturally because you see the good in everything, even when things are going bad. But at the same time, I think there's really 2 things that fed into that. One is the ability to say, like, I don't care about the norm, right? And so whether for better or worse, a lot of people, they just don't have that innately kind of wired into them. And maybe that's nature, maybe that's nurture, I'm not sure. But a lot of people really, really care what the rest of society thinks about. That's why they go to a certain school. That's why they get a certain job. That's why they do certain activities. And I've always just had the mentality, if I don't want to do it, I'm not doing it. And sometimes it hurts me, right? Sometimes it's actually a negative thing to do and kind of approach things that way. But it's just always, that's how I've been. I talk about it as like this high disagreeableness, where if somebody says, hey, we should do X, and I don't want to, I can't help myself. I just say like, no, I think we should do this other thing, right? And so you can imagine being married to me, right? And stuff is difficult at times, I'm sure. At the same time, though, I think that it's a self-belief or a confidence in a skill set. Right. And I've always told my wife, if you took me tomorrow and you basically took every single thing away from me and you put me in a country where I didn't even know the language, I think that within 5 or 10 years, I would build everything back and bigger. And it's because of a skill set. Right. And once you start to understand that skill set and you have confidence that you can employ it, the industry doesn't matter. The country doesn't matter. The language doesn't matter. None of this. But it is really hard to get to that point. And I don't think there was one day where I was just like, oh, cool, I got the skill set. But I can look back throughout my life and see there was all these things that I was doing that eventually was helping me to build the skill set. And so a lot of times I look at today, and I talked with this about, young founders all the way to my wife. And I say, what you're doing today is just practice for what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. And if you always keep that in mind, it's look around. What skills are you learning? What are the things that you go through that you can take away? What were the good things from that I want to replicate? And what were the bad things? What are the lessons learned? And the more that you do that, what you start to do is accelerate learning. You also accelerate the self-belief that you've building that skill set. And if people in their 30s knew what they would be doing in their 20s, they'd be shocked, right? People in their 40s would be shocked in their 30s. And so it really is like just practice for the next thing, no matter how important you think it is, how much you think this is the big leagues, almost always it's just practice for the next thing.
You talk about the skill set. If you had to describe this skill set to somebody, how do you describe your skill set?
I don't think it's my skill set. I think it's just the skill set of an entrepreneur, right? And it's the ability to identify a problem and solve it. And like at the end of the day, if you can do that, you will figure out how to make money, have freedom, do the things you want to do, get the things that you want. All those other things are kind of like byproducts. But ultimately, it's just, can you identify actual problems? Not bullshit, kind of fluffy things, but things that people fundamentally feel pain when they're experiencing. And are you able to figure out how to thoughtfully solve a problem? And if you can do those two things, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter, again, industry, language, geography, resources, any of that stuff. If you can figure out how to do that, then you can build businesses. And if you can build businesses, I believe that is the single greatest skill set you can have, because not only can you impact the people around you, but it can let you live the life that you want to live.
What is the most common question that young entrepreneurs ask you?
Can I have money? No, I mean, in most regards, I think most founders, there's two components that they're trying to figure out. And maybe I'm going to cut out or carve out specifically the ones that end up being successful. The ones who aren't successful, like what the questions they ask almost aren't relevant, right? But the ones who end up being successful, I think it's usually some version of, what do I not know, right? They recognize that whether it's me or many, many other people who are drastically more successful than me, I'm going through this for the first time. What do I not know? And there's one founder specifically I'm thinking about. He's built an amazing business. He's gone from 0 to $15 million in annualized revenue in less than 18 months, right? I mean, this thing is absolutely taking off from a financial perspective. Every single time I talk to him, regardless, whether it's fundraising, hiring, organizational structure, scaling, any conversation, he will make some mention to, this is the first time I'm doing this, so I want to make sure I'm doing it right. Right. And the self-awareness it takes to understand that you don't know the answers, right? That people have the experience and you can take their experience and apply their lessons so that you don't have to go through the pain they went through, I think takes a level of maturity that's a really positive sign. The other thing is the best founders, they have an ask. And so usually what ends up happening is people in a normal kind of relationship, they want to meet someone and not having an ask is really powerful. And I agree with that, right? If you meet someone on the side of the street and you're like, hey, give me $5, they're like, dude, what the fuck, right? Like, why is that person asking me for something? If you're going somewhere and you're constantly asking people for things, it's somewhat of like this like social capital bank account. And you've expended all of your social capital with everyone in your life. It's not a good position to be in, right? You can take it to the other extreme. There's a lot of people who go around like counting all the favors they've done for people, and they're like, I'm collecting. It's also not a good way to live. But I think generally it's well understood. Like, don't ask people for other things all the time. Now, for a founder though, you have an excuse. You are not asking. You are asking for your company. And when you ask for your company, you are doing your employees right, you're doing your investors right, you're doing your users right, right? And so it's your job to do this. And so when I meet with people who I walk away and I'm usually pretty impressed with, they're very clear on what those asks are. It could literally be, hey, will you invest? It could be, can you introduce me to something? It could be, can you help me think through this problem? It could be, hey, do you know so-and-so or somebody who works at this organization? Whatever the ask is, it's very clear what they're trying to do. And it's not a stupid ask. It's not, hey, can you go grab me lunch, right? It's not, hey, can you introduce me to that random person that maybe there's something there. They usually are able to say something to the effect of, hey, we are trying to get more customers in this vertical. We've identified the 4 top companies there. We see on LinkedIn you're connected to these 2 people. Do you know them well enough so that you can introduce me? By the way, I've sent you an email that you can simply forward along that'll make it easy for you. For somebody like me, how do I say no, right? You're just like, of course I want to help you. And because you have a clear ask, you've done a bunch of the work, you know that it's going to be valuable, you can tie it back to your business objectives, of course. And so I think that those are like 2 big ones that a lot of founders who end up not being successful, they're kind of just like lackadaisical about it, right? And so they end up, kind of getting lackadaisical results.
What kind of advice do you have for young people that want to be more in your position, where it's now being the investor, being the successful entrepreneur, building a brand at different levels? What would you have advised yourself when you were 23 years old to get to the point that you're at today?
The first thing is you got to not give a single fuck what anybody else thinks, right? One of the biggest limiting factors in life is everyone is worried about what everyone else is thinking.
Right.
And not only are they probably not thinking about you, but even more importantly is their opinion doesn't fucking matter, right? And so if you go throughout history and look at successful entrepreneur or successful investor after another, you will find that they usually did something that they were laughed at, that they were mocked at, people thought they were insane, that they were dumb, that they were, lost their minds. And that is ultimately where doing something different is then followed by being right. And so this idea of doing something different is easy to understand. If everyone's going left and you go right, okay, you're doing something different. But you actually need everyone to eventually realize they should have gone right and go right to end up having everyone else agree with you, to get to consensus. And so it's not about always being different, because if you're different than everyone else, likely you're wrong, right? What you want is you want to be earlier than everyone else to realize a different path is the correct one. And then you actually need everyone else to eventually agree with you. And so I think that's the first, is like, just stop caring what anyone else thinks. Especially if you have a close group of friends who are successful. Mm-hmm. What you will find is if all of your friends work in corporate America and you constantly tell them the idea that you want to go solve, they're going to laugh at you. Why are you doing that? Look, I'm making $150,000 working at this company. Right. My company just paid for me to fly to this place. I got points on my, Marriott account, or whatever dumb shit that they care about. Mm-hmm. But if you fundamentally really, really, really care about solving problems and building companies, then you've just got to stop caring what anyone else thinks. The second thing is the team is so essential. And what I find is that usually there ends up being 2 cohorts of people. Some people believe this and are really bad at actually picking who that team is. So they pick friends, they pick, just the first person they found, and they don't have the discipline to really try to find world-class people. Or you get the opposite problem, which is that people believe that all they need is themselves and the team doesn't matter. And so those 2 are wrong. What usually ends up happening is the best entrepreneurs, whether it's early on or some point, within the first year or 2, they start to put a team around themselves where every person you meet, you're just like, wow, that is a really, really high quality person, right? That is somebody that I wish I could recruit to come work at one of our companies. And so a lot of times, the way when I meet a founder, if I can get intros or I can meet some people on the team, one of the best things to simply do is sit there and talk with them. And after a 5, 10, even 15-minute conversation, would I hire this person? If this person was on our team, do I feel like we'd be better suited to go do what we're doing? If the answer is yes, over and over and over again inside of a company, like, you got a bunch of smart people who work hard that are all trying to go after the same goal, they're probably going to figure it out. The difference is if you walk into an office and you meet a bunch of the team and you're like, that is the most ragtag, group of idiots that I've ever met, it's probably not going to work out well. And so I think team is super important. But then the third thing is there's like what I call blog post founders versus like the actual founders. Right. And the blog post founders are the ones that they go read all the blog posts, right? And then they basically are like, well, I read on the blog post, this is what I'm supposed to do. But it's almost like they tried to take a playbook that someone else wrote for a different situation, a different company, and then apply it elsewhere. There are lessons you can learn, right? There are things you can take away. But what I do see the best entrepreneurs doing is ultimately they're just trying to solve the problem, right? It's just, what is the problem? How do I fix it? And so there's somebody that I recently talked with. They worked at a business. I don't want to say what it is. It's a well-known business. And part of what they do is they need leads from local small businesses. And so this person was working as an SDR, and they got, they bought leads, they had all these databases, all this stuff and everything. And he was sitting there and he was gold on and also got commission on how many high quality, vetted, qualified leads did he get. And he realized that he could post on Craigslist an ad for the thing that they had. And all of a sudden they got tons of inbound of leads, right? That's a perfect example of somebody who's sitting there, and it's a very high degree of agency, right? They're saying the playbook that the company is giving me is one playbook that I should employ.
Right.
But if ultimately the goal is to get high quality, vetted, qualified leads, then there's all these other options I should look at as well. And he found one. And then all of a sudden, guess what happened? In every single market that this company is in, they rolled out the strategy of use fucking Craigslist to get leads, right? And so that's like a very good example of, don't simply just look one step ahead. Really, understand, what is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish as a team? And then you can work backwards and understand maybe the thing you've been told to do is actually the right thing to do. Sometimes it's not, or sometimes you need to do more than just that. And so really thinking from first principles, I think, is an important skill set that a lot of people just don't have.
So then with your team and I guess your brand in general and the ventures that you're a part of, how do you approach it? Because it's maybe slightly different, but also very similar when you think about your own scaling.
I have almost no executives on our teams. I make the person that we're working with on something the CEO. You're in charge. I'm here to coach you, right? I'm here to provide help. I'm here to try to break down walls. I'm here to try to reduce friction. But at the end of the day, you're in charge.
Will you give me an example of something?
We have a business. It's a research business called Reflexivity Research. There's a young man, Will Clemente, who became very popular on Twitter. Literally, when I met him, he was working at Target, and he was doing like in-store shopping, for the apps and stuff. And he would sneak into the bathroom to tweet because he was trying to build his Twitter account. And so I didn't know this when I first met him. And then he eventually told me, he's like, literally, I'm like in the Target bathroom right now. And so he quit. He went, he worked somewhere else. We kept in touch, kept talking. And I think he and I always had this idea to go start a research business. Okay. And so when he was ready to leave, I think a lot of people would have went to Will and said, hey, will you come work at our company? Right? We'll hire you. We'll give you this nice salary. We'll do all this stuff and everything. I said the exact opposite to him. I'm not going to give you this huge salary and kind of all these perks. I'm not even going to try to really recruit you. If you want to own your own business and control your own destiny, I'll put you in business and we'll work together. And the two of us will go build a business. But ultimately, you're the CEO, you're in charge, you got to do the work. And so what ends up happening is that partnership ends up actually giving him an incredible amount of agency, but also it gives him accountability. Because if it doesn't work, well, guess what I'm asking? Hey man, why is it not working? Why is the person that is working at the company not producing high quality work? Why are we not getting results? What is going on here, right? He is ultimately going to be responsible for the success or failure of that business. Now, my job in that scenario is to do everything I possibly can to reduce friction for him, right? And make sure that he's successful. And so literally almost on a daily basis, I get on sales calls, right? And I'm literally on the sales call with him, with the salespeople, right? Doing this stuff. And it's not lost on me that in certain situations, if I'm on the call, people take it more seriously, right? That they're more likely to convert. And so I'm happy to do that. But at the same time, later today, they've got a sales call. And I text them, I say, I can't make it. It sink or swim, right? You guys close this or you don't. Yeah. And they immediately respond and say, yeah, we're on it, right? And so I think that's a good example of the world has shifted now where the friction to starting these companies is so small. And I really do believe that a huge part of the work that I do on a day-to-day basis is just, how do I help other people start their own business? And if I can do that, whether it's as an angel investor in tech companies or it's more of these kind of cash flow type businesses where we're much more kind of materially involved, in any scenario, I just go back to this idea that entrepreneurship and capitalism are really what change societies, they change communities, and they change families, right? And so if you look at the American system of capitalism, it is the single greatest system that's ever been invented, and we have built incredible things, right? How do we get more of those? Because if you go back to our earlier conversation, a huge part of innovation and technology is one solution actually creates more problems.
Right.
And so something I wrote about recently is self-driving cars. Everyone's super excited about this, right? Mortalities with car accidents is very high and it should go down. Mm-hmm. We saw when Uber rolled out to cities, all of a sudden drunk driving accidents and deaths dropped. That's great. Well, with self-driving cars, there's the belief that almost no accidents will happen. What could possibly be the negative side effect of that? Well, organ donation is going to fall off a cliff because one of the biggest sources of organ transplants is actually from car accidents.
Wow.
So if car accident deaths drop, now all of a sudden we got to figure out where the fuck are we going to find organs to help people with organ transplants. And so there was a story that recently came out where the second ever surgery for genetically modified pig heart was transplanted into a human body. Well, there was a guy, a doctor, he was the one who actually brought it up. He was like, we need to accelerate this because the faster that self-driving cars get rolled out, there is going to be a national crisis of organs that are available for transplant. There is no shortage of problems that we've got. And every time we solve a problem, new ones pop up. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. And so what we need to do is unlock all of the lost kind of static productivity inside of these big corporations and get people out of those organizations. Twitter fired thousands of people and still is operating. Yeah. Every single major Fortune 500 company could probably fire a material % of their employee base and be fine. Where are those people going to go? Well, wouldn't it be amazing if we could somehow empower them to start their own companies, go solve problems, do all this stuff? We could completely transform the American economy. It's just really fucking hard to do it.
Now, I'm curious for you as well, because as opposed to some other entrepreneurs, investors, you have a big online presence. Was that with intention in the beginning to grow? And how has the big online presence helped you as an entrepreneur, investor, or just, I guess, general opportunities?
Yeah, an insight I had early on was I thought that LinkedIn was shit and Twitter probably was a better place to like meet people because it's more about ideas rather than resume. And so I had a bunch of experience helping other people build their audiences, everything from brands all the way up to some pretty well-known entrepreneurs. And so I just said, I'd never done it for myself and I'm going to go do this. And at the time it was really focused on just how do I meet founders for deal flow? Like that was it, right? I had no aspirations of like being famous, of any of the kind of other ancillary things that would come. It was just how do I get my name and what I stand for out in front of more founders so that when they want to raise money, they say, hey, that guy seems like someone I should talk to, right? It's not rocket science. There's tons of investors like, hey, I'm going to do that too, right? I think the difference was that it's almost like they went and they talked to like a consulting firm. Like, hey, what should I say? Right. And they had these like prepackaged like bullshit things. And instead, when I started, I literally would be in the middle of a meeting with a founder. And if I said something to them I thought it was valuable to other people, I'd tweet it. If I was on a phone call, I'd tweet it. Right. I just started saying, like, this is what I believe. This is literally the truth. If you talk to me behind closed doors, this is what I would tell you. And what I quickly realized is like some of it was unpopular, but also people were just scared to say what they really believe. Right. And so a great example of this is when I go to dinner, people who come to these dinners will laugh because they're just like, of course he's going to ask the question. If there's anyone new that's there, I always ask them the same question. What's one thing you believe that if you said out loud, you would get canceled? Right? Yeah. And what it really gets at is not just what do you believe in kind of what is that idea, but also what is your perception of what is cancelable content? And then almost emphatically every single time they say it, and other people at the table go, that's not crazy. Like, I agree with that, right? And so what you end up finding is that it drastically increases the surface area of agreement between people who otherwise are scared that there is no agreement surface area. And so when you start to look at online audience, now I'm much smarter about it, right? I understand the power of it. I understand the downsides of it. But it just comes back to this idea of Warren Buffett was the greatest financial influencer of all time. Like that guy literally is just an influencer. Right? Yeah. And he monetized it by investing. Yeah. But he's no different than Meet Kevin. Right. Warren Buffett and Meet Kevin are the same person. Right? And people are like, what are you talking about? That's crazy, whatever. No. Warren Buffett very early on understood. He talked to the press. Carol Loomis was his girl. Talked to her all the time, right? And give interviews to all this stuff. He did the annual letters. Like, that's a fucking annual blog post, right? You can call it an annual letter. You can call it whatever you want, but like, it's a blog post that everyone got really excited about. He holds a festival every year. Like, he's created disciples that show up to the Mecca, right, in Omaha. And he walks around and he's being bombarded. He's got security around him. They're taking photos and selfies. And like he's a full-blown influencer. Now, because he's 90 years old, no one wants to use that terminology, right? But there's no difference between what he's doing and what people are doing today on the internet. And I always joke that, like, if Warren Buffett was growing up today, he'd have a podcast, a Substack, a Twitter account, like all this shit, right? And so this isn't new. It's not a new idea. And actually, some of the most successful people in the world understood that, and they used their kind of age's tools to be successful with it. What I do think, though, is different today is when everyone can do it, it becomes commoditized. And so you've got to be able to break through the noise, which is much harder.
Well, I think also the reason why I started following you just even on whatever platforms a couple years back is there's a lot of just shit. And there's a lot of these entrepreneurs and a lot of these investors and a lot of these XYZ whatevers that they have like the corny tweet. And they act like they're someone they're not. And honestly, to anybody with somewhat of a pulse, you read right through it, right? Mm-hmm. And what I really liked about you is that, and I'm also very much like a feeling and gut instinct person, especially when I'm going to first walk into a situation or first consume a piece of content. By listening to you, and even when you're doing the Best Business Show and stuff like that, I could feel you weren't there to sell some nonsense or some garbage. Like, you had a genuine passion for what you were talking about. And you were doing the work and you were researching and you were actually trying to add value to people in whatever ways you could. And I think that the reason why you've been successful in that, let's just talk strictly online, is because I think a lot of people have seen that and they appreciate that. I think the one thing I also thought was interesting, even in my preparations for today, was like, obviously when you go on a lot of the podcasts, they know you as the Bitcoin guy, right? For lack of a better word. Like, honestly, I don't even think that's 1% of what you do. And quite frankly, I could give a fuck about it. Like, I think we talk about Bitcoin for hours. You've done that. You do it every day. But like, what I'm interested in is the person that's in front of me, right? And how you kind of do the things that you're doing. And then at the end, you are happy, right? Because that's what ultimately matters.
The Bitcoin thing is like a fascinating case study to me, right? If anyone was following me before, I don't know, maybe end of 2018, beginning of 2019, tweeting about early stage technology stuff, right? That was my background. That's the things I cared about. And I made a very conscious decision. Like, there was an opportunity when Bitcoin fell from $20,000 to $3,000. I got asked in August of 2020 to go on national television and talk about it. And I basically was like, you guys are fools. Like, we're buying this thing and it is going to
after
rip.
You're in the fetal position on your couch.
No. This is way before. And so if you go back, like, one of the things people forget is, I think it was in December of 2018, myself and two of my partners, we issued $1 million bet to anyone in finance. Anyone. We will take Bitcoin. You pick any other asset for a decade. We'll put up $1 million. You put up $1 million, and whoever wins gets both. Not one person answered. No one. And so it goes to show, like, Bitcoin was at $3,000, right? Like, at the time, people were like, these people are insane. But we understood it. And that's why I was able to go on television, talk about it, do all this kind of stuff. And so when you look at it, why did I push so hard into the Bitcoin stuff? It's because I realized that something was going to be true in the world.
Right.
People didn't understand it yet. And I knew that no one was going to be able to break through the noise and go and communicate it. Well, like, I think I did it, right? I think it worked. And so now it's kind of like, there are hundreds, if not thousands of other people who are doing it now. Let them go do it. Like, they're actually better off now doing it than I am, right? And so, like, I did my contribution. It was a very, very small part of that entire industry, but I hope it was helpful. I think it was helpful, right? And now I see people who I literally was explaining to them Bitcoin early on that are bigger audiences, that are doing this more often. Like, it's amazing. And like, to me, that's the success. Is like, if I had any part in taking my viewpoint and like my thought process on this, which I learned from the people's shoulders I was standing on, right? The people who they had gone, learned it, went around, told people, etc. And I was able to help some other people understand it. Amazing. But it's kind of like, if I walk down the street and I ask somebody who sees me, hey, what do you think I think about Bitcoin?
Yeah.
They're like, I think you like it, right? Like, it's pretty well understood. And so it's kind of like that challenge was kind of achieved, right? And I got there. Now it's that there's other problems that I want to go and address and kind of do the same thing. And so that's what I'm doing.
Which are at the top of your list right now?
I think the single greatest threat to America right now is the fact that we have an economy where the debt to GDP ratio is incredibly high.
Right. And
regardless of what the citizens' desire is, we are going to continue to pile debt up. And so the only way that we have out of this problem is that we have to increase GDP. Like, that's it. Right. And if we don't increase the GDP growth rate, we are fucked.
Right.
And so right now, GDP annual growth is actually a little high, right? Like, we have bent it up. If you go back and you look over decades, like, it has been trending up. It used to be like near zero. There was no growth, right? Like, basically you lived on a farm, your house wasn't connected, you had no water, you had no electricity, you had no anything. And like, you just kind of survived, right? Now we produce things, right? We export things. We do all this. And so GDP has been growing, usually kind of 2.5%. Recent numbers put it up over 3%, right? Which is exciting. But we've got to continue to accelerate it. And so it goes back to this idea that if you said, line up every single occupation, what is the one occupation that is likely to have the biggest impact on the world? It's founders, right? The people who start these businesses. And I always remind people, everything around you was created by an entrepreneur. The food you eat, entrepreneur, right? The building we're in, entrepreneur. The subway system I took to get over here, entrepreneur.
Right.
The government may fund it, but ultimately the government doesn't build shit, right? They provide funding, which is an important part of it. But really what they're doing is somewhere, somehow, the money is getting into the hands of an entrepreneur and the entrepreneur is building it. And so we just need to drastically increase the number of entrepreneurs, and we need to increase the effectiveness of those entrepreneurs. And if you go and you look, like, I tweeted recently and I was like, well, we didn't get the flying cars yet, right? But we have a space manufacturing system that's up there that's producing drugs, right? We literally have all sorts of human genome editing that's going on. We have satellites that are circling the Earth right now, providing internet access to anyone who wants it. Like, you just go down the line and you're like, wait a minute. We are actually making tons of innovation progress. That is actually a controversial stance in some circles. And so similar to how people were anti-Bitcoin working, and I was able to identify that, position the asset, and explain to people, no, these people are wrong. This thing is going to actually end up working. And it ended up, at one point, it was up 20x from when I started saying that, right? So like, pretty hard to argue it didn't work. I now think that this like anti-tech movement, anti-entrepreneurship, small business owners are being attacked in this country on a daily basis from all different angles. Everything from, activists, customers, activists, media, activists, government officials, etc. And to stand up and just simply say, like, no, this is actually the single most important job in the entire country. And be unapologetic about the ambition, about the potential economic impact, and to also sit and say, people who do this job are not the super wealthy billionaires that everyone points to that come out of the tech industry. Yes, there are people who do that. But the average small business owner in America, their job sucks, right? They work way too long. They work 6-7 days a week. Like, they have no life. This is their life. And so they're doing it. And usually, I don't know, maybe they make 100 grand, 150 grand. It's a lot of money compared to the average American. But given like an hourly wage, it's not really that high. And so if you look at the American economy, small businesses are responsible for 50% of jobs.
That's crazy.
And so you start to put this all together and you're just like, yeah, like I'm cool, right? I will go say the thing that everyone's thinking that no one wants to say. And now there's a lot of people saying it, right? Which is good, but we need way, way more people to say it. Well, and I think it'll change.
I think it's also interesting because, my generation, I felt, for lack of a better word, it is soft. In the sense that, like, when you say something like what you're saying, which if they're real, it's true. But there's a lot of, like, they get butt hurt and they bring emotions into it and this. But on the flip side, though, I think because a lot of people feel the way that I feel, you're seeing and I'm curious to see if you feel this as well, almost a resurgence. There's going to be a reaction to these actions, right? Where there is other people on the young side of the younger generations that are kind of going more in a traditional old school sense of like, work hard, get after it. Your feelings, matter to an extent, but not that much at the end of the day. Go get after it. I'm curious if in the young founders that have had success, you find that to be true or not.
It's definitely true. You can think of it as a pendulum, and the pendulum's
Right.
kind of swinging in the other
Right.
direction, which is a positive. One of the ways that I describe it to people is there's a book about the McMillan family. So for those that don't know, there's the McMillan family and the Cargill family, right? And Cargill is obviously one of these large businesses here in America, and it's owned by both families, but Cargill's name's on it. And the McMillan family came from Europe, and when they got here, they literally landed in Canada, and they went to like, think of it almost like the general post, like the general area. And somebody said to him, cool, like walk down this trail, go like, 20 miles, hook a right at the tree, right? And you guys get the 200 acres over there, right? That's your spot. When they showed up, there was a fucking piece of land.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There was no farm. There was no building. There's no anything.
Yeah.
And literally they had to build that from scratch. Now, some people look at that and they're like, well, obviously technology is better. Like I could just rent an apartment. Yeah, no shit. Right. But the point is that like we live in the safest, most prosperous time in human history. We got the easiest lives ever. Like we have a cake life compared to our ancestors. And so when you look at that, you're like, okay, what are the problems? And there are real problems, right? There are things that people actually are upset about, should be upset about, tough times, all this stuff, right? But a lot of, I think, where people kind of reel back and that help the pendulum swing back to kind of this more old school way of thinking is when you start to complain about things that are just nonsense, right? And it really is a society that almost has reached a point where how fortunate are we to care about that? Right? And I saw an interview with 50 Cent, and they asked him about depression.
Yeah.
And it's the most savage shit I ever heard. He said, where I come from, no one's got depression. That's a luxury belief. Right? And he was just like, people are trying to eat. And you look at that, and there's a gentleman, Rob Henderson, who's got a book that's coming out soon. And one of the key, kind of ideas is this idea of luxury beliefs, right? Is that you are so fortunate and so privileged and so wealthy and so safe that you can believe that. Because guess what? There's people who literally live down the street from you who can't fucking believe that. And you
don't have time. They don't have the time or
these like the safe spaces, all that stuff's been like highly covered. But the ones that get me are look at the car unions right now, right? The car unions, I genuinely believe that the majority of people in those unions, they simply want to go to work, they want to earn a great living, and they want to go home and provide for their families. Like they are hardworking Americans through and through, right? And then what you see is that you've got people who essentially are using them as pawns in a negotiation with a corporation. And they're like, cool, we want a 40% pay raise and we only want to work 4 days a week. Like that's their starting point. Now, I don't think they actually believe they're going to get that stuff, but as many people have now covered, it would bankrupt the company. And so you get in this weird world where you're like, okay, so you want a 4-day work week. Like, sure, that sounds awesome. But if you're getting paid hourly, you actually end up making less money if you don't get the pay raise. Like it's like a very complex thing. And so when you go and you actually talk to people, and that's probably one of the best things that I've been able to do is because of the online audience, whether I reach out to them or actually I get tons of emails, DMs, people will find me if I'm somewhere and they'll talk to me or whatever. And you find that like some people who are even represented in some of these groups don't agree with the overarching narrative. Right? They simply want to provide for their families. And so when you look at that and you say to yourself, like, man, how could we unleash this? To me, that is, we go from 2 to 3% GDP growth to 5 or 6, right? We go from individuals being statically held up inside these corporations, being unproductive, and you get them out and they actually are able to make more money, right? One of the stories in media right now that a lot of people don't want to talk about is there's journalists just walking out of these newsrooms and they're going and doing literally writing the same thing they were just writing. Now they're doing it for themselves and they're making 4 times more money. And if you look at the structure of that corporation, the company was making 4 times what they were paying them, right? So if, just use easy numbers. If someone was writing something and the company's making $400,000 in ad revenue off of that, they were paying the reporter $100K. If the reporter walks out, keeps writing, and is able to sell the same ads, they make $400,000. Of course, people are going to do it once they figure out kind of the playbook or how to do it. It's just how do we accelerate that and kind of eat the unproductivity in corporate America specifically, but just America in general, and unleash it into this entrepreneurial way.
I'm curious, what do you think is your current biggest success to date?
I don't think I had anything. Like Every single thing that I've worked on, to me, is I simply want to help other people or other things be successful, right? And so when you ask me, when I did things at Facebook, people would be like, oh, you did this, whatever. It's like, not really. Like, I was a product manager, right? You know what a product manager is? Basically a really fancy title for a fucking manager, right? And so, like, sure, I sat in some meetings, we made some decisions, whatever. But like, really at the end of the day, the product manager probably gets too much credit when things go right, and they probably get blamed too much when things go wrong. But that is ultimately what the leadership position is there for on that specific team, right? If you even go look at some of the companies that I've built and things like that, I don't think there's a single company that I've built where I could have done it 100% by myself, right? And you even like, oh, what about the podcast? Like, we've had multiple teams work with us, right? In terms of content and editing, ad sales, production, like all this stuff. Can't do it. And so when you start to kind of switch from I want to accomplish to, at some point in my career, I just said, like, how do I make these people successful? Whatever it is, all of a sudden, everything started to work.
Interesting.
And so I think when you ask about like accomplishments, it's more of just like as teams, right? We've been able to do a bunch of stuff. But really, probably if I sat down and I was like, what am I most proud of? It's just learning, right? If I look at myself at 25 to 35, a whole different person.
Right. Like,
damn, what can I accomplish from 35 to 45, right? And so if that is kind of like your internal measure, like, I'm fucking winning, right? And there's nothing anyone else can do to get in the way, because it's ultimately just up to me. Am I learning? Am I improving or not?
You also talked about a concept with regards to opportunities, kind of experimenting, and I think, I don't want to butcher it, but more like the gift and the curse is that you're interested in a bunch of different things. There's different ventures you can go on and kind of, and I related to that on a fundamental level too, because I feel like I'm at that place in my life right now where I have a lot of different interests business-wise, things that I'm starting, things that are a little bit farther along, and trying to understand what's sticking, what's not sticking, where now the knowledge and, I guess to an extent, the level of experience is an advantage, but then also then converting it into financial success as well. Based on that, what when you see a young entrepreneur, a young person trying to really figure out what it is that's working or not working, how do you approach it from more of a mentorship or coaching level, if you will?
Sounds real dumb. I just ask them, right? Is it working? If there's any hesitation, it's not working. Right. It's such a binary thing.
Yeah.
And it's hard, right? Like, I'm much better at telling someone else it's not working than even noticing things we're doing. Because you see like the light at the end of the tunnel. You're like, well, maybe if, this happens, the sky falls and this happens, like, then maybe we can make it successful. And because you're an optimist, you're like, well, there's like a 1% chance that could happen. Right. And so you got to sometimes catch yourself and be like, this is fun, like objectively not working. Okay. Shut it down, move on to the next thing, right? And so it's an acquired skill. It takes time and pattern recognition and all that kind of stuff. It helps to kind of predefine, okay, we're going to give ourselves, 6 months, X dollars, and here's the metric that we have to hit in order to, prove to ourselves this is working or not.
Right.
And so you can kind of gauge your progress against, kind of an agreed upon framework. But when I sit down with someone, it's just like, is it working? And you can come up with all kinds of crazy charts and graphs and this and that and decks and like what you can say all kinds of shit. You can be the best salesperson in the world.
Right.
It's obvious whether it works or not. It's obvious whether people like it or not. And so, similar to, go back to Warren Buffett, like, he does a deal off a napkin in 5 minutes. Right? Why? Because they're screamingly obvious deals to do. Right? If you said to me like, hey, this building was last sold for $10 million 4 years ago. Today you can buy it for $1. Okay, I'll ask like 3 or 4 questions, like, what's the catch, right? And very quickly you're going to realize, like, yeah, you should probably do it. You don't need a ton of diligence, right? The risk is $1. If everything goes wrong, you lost $1.
Yeah.
The upside is 9,900,000, whatever, right? And so I think that the same thing is true in terms of especially early stage startups. It's like, when it works, And we've almost like over optimized, and we're like, well, the ad ratio or the ROAS or my K factor or whatever, like, it's helpful to understand all that stuff, but don't lose the binary, like, it works or it doesn't work. Because really, that's what really, really matters.
What's your final kind of, because I think the due diligence aspect, especially from an investor perspective, is very interesting. But is there a final kind of metric that you look at when you're making that last decision on whether or not you're going to invest or not into something?
If it's the first investment, if it's later stages of investment, or it's a, second, third, fourth, fifth investment I'm making in a company, there's a lot of diligence. If it's the first time I'm investing, especially a pre-seed or seed round,
Right.
I do no diligence. Zero. Because every single thing they're telling me is bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm going to do this. Here's my team.
Yeah.
Here's the, like, I've literally invested in companies, and within weeks, the team, everyone but the one founder, is completely different, and they're in a whole different industry.
Right.
There's no amount of diligence that would have, got at that. And so now I'll talk to them about, what are you doing? How are you thinking about it? But really what I'm trying to gauge is not their answer, it's how they think.
Right.
How do they make decisions? Because what I need to put money behind someone who's ambitious,
Right.
who's willing to work hard, who can recruit, communicate, sell, etc., but also who can make sound decisions regardless of the situation that they face. And so if you can find one of those individuals, I don't give a fuck what they're working on. Right? I try to invest. And so it's bombastic to say I do no diligence, right? But really what I'm doing is I'm diligencing the person, because that's the investment.
Yeah.
I'm not investing in this company, right? I have companies literally that will send us K1s sometimes, and I have to go back and talk to the founder, like, what is the company? Like, the name of the company was something completely different, and now they're doing business as, and it's another name. But on the K1, it may say the original LLC name, right? Or C Corp name. And it's like, man, how far have we come that I literally don't even remember the original name of the business, because we've built something else that works. And so I think that's one. Another thing that's really important in terms of the diligence stuff is like understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are. Right. And so there's a couple of people in my life that I think are much better judges of X than I am. Right. And some of it's because I've seen them make a number of judgment calls, right, and be right a lot of times. Some of it is because we've worked together. And so when we face situations, they thought A, I thought B, and they ended up being right almost every time. And so you eventually just kind of build trust in that. But if I face one of those situations, I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I have to make the decision. A lot of times, just yesterday, I got a pitch from something. It was a commercial real estate. I have a friend. He's very well known in the commercial real estate world. He's super successful. And I sent it to him. And I said, I think this is a pass, but I'm an idiot. So like, can you look at this? Is there something in here that I'm missing? Because this company specifically has a really big customer, right? Like a really well-known customer. And it's like, why is this company using this? Right. And so there's that one single piece of doubt in my mind. So I sent it to him, and he basically confirmed everything I thought as the pros, the cons, kind of the potential outcome, all the stuff. But he is 1,000 times better prepared to evaluate that business than I am. So just use him. Right. And guess what happened? He's like, hey man, thanks for sending it. That was really cool to look at. Okay. Like, my friend's thanking me, and he's like doing work for me. Like, this weird thing. Right. And so I just think that it's like not only the decision-making of the person that you're investing in, but also like being aware of where are you a strong decision maker and where are you not? And then being able to build, even if it's a loose team or a network of people who can help you in those areas, it's helpful.
What do you feel like are your weaknesses currently as an entrepreneur, and that you're actively?
I'm just the ultimate optimist, right? And so like whenever you think about what could go wrong, like, sure, if I really sit down and you're like, hey, you got to think of this stuff. I could probably be decent at it. But immediately when someone tells me an idea, I just jump right into like, okay, how could you do this? How could you get some traction? How could it scale? And what if everything went right? Now that probably lends itself pretty good to investing in early stage tech companies. Right. But like, I've looked at a bunch of public companies, and there's a decently well-known public company that we thought, from our family office, we were going to go and do something with. And, we got pretty close. We did like months of work. And then I just reached out to someone who had sold their business to the company. And I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And then it was like a laundry list of all the risks and things that we hadn't even really gotten into. Some of it was because it was a public company versus a private company. Okay. Some of it was just, here's all the things we could do to turn this around, right? And so I think really understanding like optimism is this superpower and can really be an advantage, but you got to be aware of where the downsides are. And again, some of my favorite people to talk with are like the ultimate pessimist, right? And we'll just debate all along, right? And they're never going to become optimists. I'm never going to become a pessimist. But what I'm doing is I'm sharpening and understanding and learning and realizing like this thing that I thought no one could attack, right? You think is like the most evil thing in the world. Right. How is that possible? Yeah. Right. And you start to understand like, okay, the reason why I don't see how someone could attack it is because literally your thought process, your perspective on this is so outlandishly different that I didn't even think anyone could hold that position. But now I've been exposed to it. I understand it. And therefore now I can start to sharpen the way that I think about what are downsides, what are the pessimistic cases.
I'm also curious when it comes to working with your wife as well, because right now I'm working on a couple different things with my girlfriend, and I'm curious as to how you guys find that, you know, whether you want to call it, the word balance thing is overused, but like the right working relationship when it comes to working with the person you love and being with the person you love.
So we have, like, she has her thing, I have my thing, right? Which I think is important first. So it's not like we're working on the same company. I have a number of friends who do work with, whether it's significant other, dating, marriage, whatever. But for us, like, she has her book, she has the profile, I have my stuff. And so it's more so we're helping each other than like one person's the boss, the other one's not, you know, like any kind of dynamic like that. So maybe that's like first and foremost is like we never were like, hey, we're starting a company together. Also, she knows my strengths and weaknesses. I know hers. And so a lot of times I will ask her for an opinion when I know, hey, this is probably, I'm entering into one of my weaknesses. A great example that's kind of stupid, but I think will entertain people, Twitter. Like every once in a while, I type one out and I'm like, banger. And I'm like, hey, what do you think? And she's like, nah, that's put that one in the drafts, right? And so like, I know that like, I'm very much the gas in that situation and she's the brakes. And she'll even say sometimes like, you're right, not worth it, right? And so like, it's helpful to have that kind of balance. At the same time though, having someone who is ambitious is really important because she gets it to a degree. And maybe she's like, all right, you can tone it out a little bit, but like my level of ambition, she also matches. And therefore she doesn't think it's crazy that I want to do this or that, or whatever. The downside to it is when you go 1,000 miles an hour all day long, right? I mean, I literally get, I don't know, 1,500 emails a day, and 6:30 in the morning, I just start responding. It's like all day. Before I go to sleep, I try to clear out a bunch of them and do all this stuff. And sometimes you just feel like, man, this is a lot. But she'll say to me like, hey, I miss talking to you. We talked all day. But what she means is like, not about the business bullshit, right? Like we are husband and wife, we have a child, like we have this whole other life. And so having an understanding between the two of you that like, when either one of you feels like it's too much business, not enough like personal, that there's a way to bring it up without like causing arguments. And like, we got friends who do all kinds of crazy shit. And then the other person just being like, okay, like put everything aside. Like this is the most important thing. And so that like takes time and trust and that type of stuff. I don't think anyone should take like relationship advice from me, right? By no means do I think I have some advantage there. But I do notice that like there's little things like that just kind of help make sure that you kind of pull back towards the balance.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about you?
Biggest misconception. I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. Like it's almost.
Did you ever care what people thought?
Yeah, of course. Like at different points in your life, I think you care, and it's not like you care what everyone thinks. It's usually you care what that one person thinks. Right.
Who is that one person for you?
Different points at different times of my life. Right. Like when you're in the Army. I remember that there was a scenario where I was going to be up for a promotion. And there's like this one guy, right, that like I knew was going to have a say. He wasn't even the only guy who has a say. But like I knew who the one guy was. And I was like, damn, I like, maybe I could like walk by and like, like stand up real straight today. Like whatever, right? But like you can take that example and use it across all these different kind of facets of your life. And I think even like in your personal life, right? Everyone's got like that one friend that whether you agree with it or not, or even understand it, like you probably have a mimetic, relationship with where like they do something, you're like, fuck, I gotta go do something. Right? Sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's not. But I think that it's a different person at every point of your life. Sports team is a good example. Like everyone cares what the coach thinks, even if they say they don't. Even the guy who's like, I don't give a fuck. He controls playing time. Right? You better care what he thinks. And so I think that's probably something that I started to learn is, whenever I go to make a decision, sometimes I ask myself like, who am I trying to impress, or like why am I making this decision? Is there somebody else's influence that's playing into it? It's easier to talk about than actually to like identify. But definitely that. And then on like the misconception side, like, yeah, I really don't care. But I would say that most people, because I don't take certain things that I've been involved in my life and like put it in their face. And I know that because they are surprised when they find out about it. And they're like, why don't you talk about that? I think there's a lot of people who are just like, what's that guy ever done?
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's a element of being underestimated that's really fucking powerful. Right. And it's weird for me to say that because people are like, what do you mean? You got all these followers, like all this stuff and everything. But one of my favorites is always like, people are like, okay, economist. I'm like, well, I do have an economics degree. You know, sure, right? Like whatever. Or one time I was talking about geopolitics in the Middle East, and the guy was like, what the fuck do you know about geopolitics? I'm like, well, I literally went there. Okay, right? And so you like, again, if you cared what they thought, you would like put it in their face, right? You would like kind of constantly brag about it. And do I just don't give a fuck, right? And I learned that lesson. That's not an original idea. Like I learned that from other people who I would meet, and I would find this one little detail. I'm like, dude, you're supposed to like be like on the front cover of a magazine talking about this. And they're just like, I don't care. And I was like, oh, you don't have to constantly try to take the accomplishments you have and like boast about them. Actually, you can just like be you. And if you legitimately don't care, then that's it. Some people do care and they should go boast about it, right? Because it makes them happy or whatever. But I think it's just like, who are you? And once you're comfortable in that, like everything else falls in place.
When it's all said and done, and hopefully many more years of happy, healthy life, how do you want people to remember you and the legacy that you live, if you ever think about that? Because some people don't.
The only thing I care about is that they just say, hey, his kids are awesome people. Like, that's it, right? Everything else it's a game, right? And maybe that was one of the big insights at some point in my life. I was like, this is a fucking game, right? Like, I treat it like a professional athlete would treat playing a sport, right? So I'm very serious about it. I work hard at it. I try to get better. I do all the things that you would do if you're a professional athlete playing in the NBA or NFL. But it's a fucking game, right? If tomorrow every business blew up, it goes back to the idea, like, I have a skill set. It would suck, right? Like, I have to go rebuild shit. But hey, that's just the cards you're dealt, and you got to go and you got to deal with it. No point in complaining. But the one thing that like I spent a lot of time thinking about is, and maybe it's because, we've got a young daughter and it's like somewhat newer than if you had, 15, 16-year-old kids or something like that. But I think a lot about, like, I go and I play the game, but then I have to come home and I've got to help raise a family. Right. And like that component to me is actually the more important part. How you're measured on that, I'm not really sure. I think it's kind of intuition. Like, somebody just meets a kid and they're like, even if you don't know the parents, you're kind of just like, all right, the parents didn't fuck this up. Or like, where were the parents? It's kind of like again, goes back, like, does it work or does it not? You kind of just know, like, kids screwed up or kids not. And so, like, the more we can be on the not screwed up side, probably the better.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time. On a personal level, I think, I admire you for a lot of what you've done on the professional side, but I think it's exactly what you just said, right? It's how are people going to measure you at the end of the day? And at the end of the day, it's the family, it's your child, it's what you're curating at home, that I also admire you for, and the ways that you speak about and articulate it. Because I think for the younger generations, right, especially with all the content that's out there, you start measuring yourself to those other people that you think are what they are putting out that they are. And then, but the real stuff that matters is exactly where you ended on it, which is at home, right? And it's the people that you love, because the rest, it could all blow up in your face at any given time. But I appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and hopefully Andrew will come over here and do it too.
Fuck yeah. He's not even far. Like, what the fuck is the issue? Thanks, man. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram at felix.levine, and if you have something to say, please leave a comment.